Good morning and welcome to a new series of 20 minutes on fighting disinformation. Next week it will be 1 year since we first launched our series as our contribution to the invasion of Ukraine and the stream of news coming out of the invasion. Some of it was true, some of it was not. And we believe that by offering a platform for experts to share insight in fighting mis and disinformation, we will all be better equipped to report news. Today we'll hear from Eskil Grøndahl Sivertsen from the Norwegian Defence Research Establishment. He's one of the most senior experts on information warfare in Norway. He has been advisor to 5 ministers of defense and involved in information strategy related to warfare. In his talk this morning, Eskil will focus on Russia's system of and techniques for the manipulation and propaganda on the internet and social media. I think it's fair to say that in the run-up to the anniversary of the invasion, this is a topic that's not any less relevant. Eskil, we are very pleased to have you with us this morning. We are looking forward to your presentation. The microphone is all yours.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. We only have 20 minutes, so I'll go quickly through this. I'll talk about Russia, how they do their information manipulation, and how this is part of a system. And the backdrop, of course, is for our interest in this is how Russian information warfare is an integrated part of how Russia conducts their not only war but also a power play, geopolitical power play in the world. And since the 2016 election in the US, there's been a lot of focus on Russian influence. That was the first sort of operation that we in modern time that we have a lot of information about, and that's sort of sparked the interest in the international community and also increased research on Russian information warfare. I'll quickly dive into this. I'll start with specific examples. So what happened since 2016? Russia has been conducting information operations or influence operations all over the world, targeting European audiences, audiences in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, as well as, of course, its and the US, Australia, most of the world. In addition to, of course, its own public. I'll be talking more of a European-centric view. So fast forwarding from 2016, in the time between 2016 and today, Russia's been interfering with elections in France, Germany, the US. They've been conducting information operations in the Baltics, the Balkans, in Europe, all over the world. And there's many examples of this now. The latest sort of mapped out influence operation conducted by Russia in connection with the war was revealed in September last year. And what they did, what they did new this time, or not exactly new, but they've sort of honed in on some different tactics. One of the things that they've been doing more of recently is cloning websites. So what they did in this operation was to clone 60 well-known established news outlets from European outlets, newspapers like the Spiegel and Welt in Germany, or the Guardian in the UK. And the websites looked legitimate. Their URLs very similar to the original URL, and the content was in local languages, and it was conveying Russian propaganda narratives that was funneled through other Russian proxy sites, propaganda sites online. These are just 4 examples from that campaign, which ran over the summer of last year. And as you can see, they do it to try to sort of distract audiences. The one from the Guardian here is about how the Bucha massacre was conducted by Ukraine to put the blame on Russia. And the examples to your right are examples how they exploit the energy crisis, or the uncertainty that a lot of people had regarding energy over the summer last year, and they tried to amplify the German population's anxiety and fear of the consequences of the energy crisis. And the message was, of course, that you should stop supporting Ukraine and stop supporting Russian sanctions against Russia, because it only backfires and creates tougher lives for Germans. In the same operations, they They used mapped out 1,633 fake accounts on Facebook that were used to spread links to these articles for the cloned fake websites. Also with images such as these and jokes, memes have become very popular. And I think it's an interesting development. It's actually there's something now called meme warfare, and it sounds funny, but it's memes can be very effective because they sort of avoid our most common tactics with fact checking and checking the source, because memes are just humoristic or sarcastic images, jokes, things that are designed to amplify or confirm prejudice or already existing opinions. And it doesn't really matter if it's true or not. It's just funny things. They also use the fake accounts to infiltrate the public debate. In these examples are from Germany, where they pose as you have Russian influence actors posing as Germans, infiltrating the public debate, engaging the Germans on their Facebook pages and Facebook groups that they are in. And here are some examples on Twitter, where this is an example of how a baker that was thought life was being tough. Some of these stories are credible. Some stories are not. The way Russia typically does this is to throw out a lot of different stories and see what sticks. One story that came out and quickly died was the story that a lot of German senior citizens were fearing death because they were concerned that there wasn't enough gas to run the crematoriums. So that was interesting thing. They also use the fake accounts to publish direct images and also fake stories about how everybody were demonstrating against Russia's or against German support of Ukraine. Of course, the picture has nothing to do with the story, and that's one of the many tactics that Russia uses. Here's another example of how they tried to stage a fake demonstration in Latvia against Latvian military service. And so this campaign ran over about three months. They used about $100,000 in Facebook advertising, targeting people in Germany and Italy, and had a reach in France. And with most advertising actually spent in France, and they reached between 1.5 and 1.7 million French people through this campaign, through just the Facebook advertising. That comes in addition to the organic spread, of course. Here's another example of demonstrations, because demonstrations have been sort of a trademark trick from Russian actors over many years. They've staged many demonstrations in the US, among other countries, where you have Russian actors instigating demonstrations in foreign countries, and of course the people attending those demonstrations are not necessarily aware that they are being manipulated to attend a demonstration that is actually staged by Russian actors. This example is from outside the American embassy in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, just before the invasion last year. And the story then, which is a story that it's still running, is that it's actually the U.S. that are using Ukraine as a area of proxy war against Russia. And the story here is that the Ukrainians want the U.S. out of Ukraine. And there was a reporter at this scene from BuzzFeed, and he talked to these demonstrators, and they were mostly senior citizens. They were shipped in on buses, and when he asked them what they were there for, they didn't have a good explanation. They had received a phone call from a woman named Natasha and offered some money, put on buses, and they were handed these English banners, and they were photographed in front of the embassy, and then in a few minutes, you had created a fake story that Ukrainians are protesting against U.S. involvement in Ukraine. Of course, this is nothing new. This is an example that's probably well known to many of you from the 60s. Sort of using proxy actors is something that the Russian, former Soviet Union, been doing for a long time. It's part of the Russian military or doctrine on political warfare. This is an example from the 80s, where KGB had established a English-speaking newspaper in India called The Patriot. And in the 80s, they ran this story about how the HIV virus was created by the US to target the gay community and African Americans. The purpose of this was, of course, to discredit the US on the international scene. Excuse me. They use the same tactics today. Proxy sites are well known, and of course, with the internet, there are many of them. These are just two examples of proxy sites that exist out there today, run by the Russian intelligence or other actors connected to Russia, and they look credible, a little legitimate, but they're not attributed. So their connection to Russia is not communicated anywhere. So it's easy to mistake them for credible sources. Now, how Russia does this is quite, the recipe is quite straightforward, but they have a complex system of execution. So it's all about constructing a narrative, a story, a way to see the world, a framework for interpretation, framework for interpreting facts. And when you construct the narrative, then you have to prove the narrative right. And you do that by amplifying real stories that fit the narrative, or constructing fake stories, or creating stories that are, somewhere in between. So to try to find examples. So one example of proving the narrative is in Russia. One of the leading Russian narratives over the last years or 20 years have been that the West hates us. If you remember, the last year we had an incident where a Norwegian diplomat was being quite obnoxious to Russian people in a hotel in Murmansk in Russia, and that video was leaked and basically proved to the Russian audience that there is widespread hate against Russians in the West. Then they amplify these narratives, and they do so by using some proxy sources, social media amplifications. Over the last year or so, we've seen an increase in diplomatic efforts. So the social media presence and the narratives that is pushed out by the Russian diplomatic system, or diplomats and also government officials, is increasingly connected to the larger sort of propaganda apparatus, as well as using influencers to convey the messages on YouTube, TikTok, and other popular channels. Then they have one of many tactics is then to, by doing that, you flood the information space, basically producing so much information that people get overwhelmed. One example is from Sergei Skripal case, where he was a double agent and he was poisoned in 2018 in the UK by Russian intelligence. And in the 4 weeks following Britain's attribution, saying that this is Russia behind this, RT and Sputnik, the main propaganda channels of Russia, they produced 735 different news stories with 138 different narratives of what could have happened. So I think a key takeaway from this is Russian propaganda is not necessarily trying to make you believe in a lie, but make you doubt what the truth actually is. Memes, I already mentioned, but they also have large production of photos and videos, obviously because that's most engaging on social media. And the effects that they try to achieve can, to a large extent, be sorted in these four. So dismiss is, for example, when someone says, don't listen to them because, and then they throw out an insult about the source. For example, in Russia, they will say that the West is morally corrupt and evil. So don't listen to them. Distort is when the facts don't suit their preferred story, so they will make up their own facts, such as Ukraine is full of Nazis or the West started the war. Distract is to move focus by changing the subject using techniques like whataboutism. So you have, and I think we can hear this every now and then, I don't support Russia's war in Ukraine, but, and then you have another statement such as, what about the West's war in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and so forth? Or this is also about reframing. So you can accuse the accuser of being guilty of the same thing, such as Ukraine staged the Bucha massacre to blame Russia. And lastly, dismay means to try to scare people off. Messages like, we put our nuclear forces on high alert, or if you continue to support sanctions against Russia, it's just going to make your life very hard. I'm not going to spend much time on this. I think I'm running out of time soon, but this is just to show you part of the Russian disinformation system. And these are all different news outlets, think tanks, and sort of fringe websites that are connected to Russian propaganda network, run by Kremlin associates, Russian oligarchs, and Russian intelligence, as well as you have to your right many websites that are not formally connected to the Kremlin, but they act as Kremlin amplifiers. Now, all these websites, and there are thousands of them if you go into the proxy source, they are linked to a system that is sort of organic, and I'll explain how this works, and this will be sort of, I think, my last slide. This is a model designed by the US State Department to explain how the Russian propaganda ecosystem works. And they have defined this as divided it into 5 pillars in the spectrum between what's visible to the right and what's denied or covert to the right. Sorry, visible to the left, covert to the right. So the first one is official government communications. Statements from Putin or Russian ambassadors or embassies. Then you have the second one is state-funded global messaging, which is state-owned media such as Sputnik, RT, news agencies like TASS. The third one is proxy sources, which are the 2 websites that I just showed you are examples of seemingly independent, legitimate websites that are directly or indirectly under Russian control. And then you have social media, 4th category, using fake accounts, bot networks, and so forth. And also to the right, the 5th category is hack and release operations, site capture. You can take over a website and change the content, or clone websites like the 60 websites that I showed you in the beginning. So this works as an ecosystem. So say a news story can start with an article on RT in column 2, and it will be amplified on social media in column 4 by bot networks and other accounts. And then you have all these sources. The proxy sources will take their cue from the big ones, the RT and Sputnik, and they will create and amplify the same stories and use each other as reference. And then the story can be so big that you'll have a comment from column 1 from the official sources of Russia, and then that's enough to make a new story on RT. And then you have this system where one actor's input is another actor's output, and you can create a story that was non-existent, and you can make it very big, and you can obfuscate where the story started in what we call information laundering. And that brings me to my maybe the last slide, or second last slide. Information laundering is where the stories break out, and it's from sort of the ecosystem, and they come into our social media feeds and other news. And these are 2 examples of how that works. So the examples to the left is an example of Thomas Fetch. He's a politician for the German radical right party, Alternative for Deutschland. And this is an example of how he shared in the summer a link on Facebook to one of the cloned fake websites with a new story that probably fit his narrative. And the example to the right is from BBC morning TV the day after the invasion on 24th February. And it's super short. I'll just show you.
Stuart Mackenzie left his home in Kiev yesterday and travelled to Poland, and he's been filming his journey.
So the story here was that, the war has started in the early hours of the morning. You had Russian fighter jets flying information over Kiev. And of course, the video clip here is the story is not true. The video is from a air show 2 years before, and this was already debunked when the people of the morning show aired this. And this is one of the examples of how quickly fake stories can penetrate sort of the go through the threshold and reach credible media. So if the BBC reports on this, you and I will probably believe it, and other, Norwegian or other international news outlets will also probably believe it, and they will trust that BBC did their own fact checking, where in fact in this instance they didn't. that's 20 minutes on Russian disinformation. I think one of the key takeaways for you today is that this is about a lot more than just disinformation. It's about a very sophisticated, large-scale, industrial-scale system of manipulation that Russia uses to achieve benefits and on the international scene, and to increase their own power and also weaken the West. Thank you.
Wonderful, Eskil. Thank you so much for taking us through so much in only 20 minutes. For those of you that's new to 20 minutes on fighting disinformation, we don't take questions at the end of the presentation, just to keep it short and that everyone will be able to fit it into a busy calendar. For those that would like to have a copy of the presentation, a recording of this presentation will be made available on our website very soon, so look out for it there. And we'll be back with another session on 20 minutes on fighting disinformation in March. So more information to follow. So again, Eskil, thank you so much for taking us through the propaganda war this morning. It has all equipped us to read the news in a different light. Thank you.